Mr Speaker, I commend this budget to the House.
And with that, the KiwiSaver debate began.
Building the financial security of New Zealanders.
They cannot be trusted when it comes to the national treasure that is our KiwiSaver scheme.
There's higher contributions.
Most people will be better off with the changes.
$28,000 off the bottom line straight away.
And less government subsidy.
I guess it's possible to be happy and sad all at the same time, right?
Yeah. So we talk to the experts and ask whether it will mean financial security for all. Welcome to the NBR Podcast. I'm Simon Shepherd. After much lobbying and debate, the government has dared to tinker with the national treasure that is KiwiSaver. Default contribution rates climb to 4%, 16 and 17-year-olds included. But government contributions slashed in half or gone altogether for those earning $180,000. So we've got four perspectives from business, the financial sector and a major KiwiSaver provider. But first, Retirement Commissioner Jane Wrightson. Can you give me your short overall impression of the changes to KiwiSaver?
Overall, they're good. They're going to be positively beneficial for around 80% of New Zealanders. And the negative effects on the other 20 is what we're going to look at in more depth over the coming weeks.
Okay.
So most people will be better off with the changes, and that's because the additional employer and employee contribution, 4+4, generally outweighs the negative effect of the government contribution either halving or disappearing.
Okay, well, let's jump into those nuts and bolts then. So let's talk about the positive, the raising of the default contribution from 3 to 4 over 3 years. Now, you have called for this as the Commission. Is that quick enough?
It's probably about right. Employers have always said they generally don't mind in theory, but they need a runway. And I think for employees too, that works because, as you know, cost of living's a bit tough at the moment and there's a bit of stress out there. So a slow graduated approach to this, I think, is fine.
Do you know, or have you done any sort of surveys, research on whether people will actually do it and then opt out, or not even want to do it? Because there is that option that they don't have to do the default of 4%.
Yeah, well, firstly, KiwiSaver is voluntary for a start. And secondly, they can opt back to 3, which is fine. We'll keep tabs on the data around that. Because nobody will know whether that's going to be a thing or not, right?
Right.
What we know about default numbers is that they're quite sticky, meaning once people are there, they're there and they don't generally move unless they go into hardship. And if you're in hardship, you've got a series of other problems, the least of which is pausing your KiwiSaver contributions.
Yep.
So at the moment, we don't know. My hunch is there won't be too much negative effect, but again, the proof will be in the pudding.
So you're saying that this raising of the default contribution rate to 4% over 3 years will mean that it will affect 80% of the KiwiSaver members, but Positively, yeah. But does it concern you that it could have a flow-on effect to those smaller employers, and that they may struggle to pass this on, or it could have another effect on wages?
I think there would always be an argument for that. In fact, I hear that argument all the time for any kind of employee benefit. And the fact is, it's an employee benefit. And because there's a graduated runway on this, we don't think the impact for employers will be too much of a hard landing.
And that's where we need to bring in the employers.
I suspect it'll be a bit mixed.
Alan McDonald is the head of advocacy at the Employers and Manufacturers Association.
So 0.5% by April next year. At least we've got nearly a year to prepare for it. But, for a bottom line, that can be quite significant, particularly in smaller businesses. I was talking to someone last night. It's got 8 or 9 employees. That 0.5% represents $28,000 off the bottom line straight away.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a significant chunk for any small business in particular. So there's that kind of impact. So that's taking it from 3 to 3.5, and then you've got the other step 2 years later to 4. Again, overall, probably the right thing to do, and right sort of direction. Australia is 12%, and everyone goes, wow, look how wealthy they are. Well, part of that is underpinning that.
Yeah.
But that does come at a cost, and it comes at a cost for the employer and the employee. So don't forget the employees also got to lose effectively 0.5% to their scheme, or 1% overall, although they have the option of opting out, which I think is actually more problematical than
Well, let's
anything.
talk about that. So you can, even though 4% or 3.5% is going to be the default, then 4%, you can opt out to go back to the 3% as an employee.
Yeah.
The employer can't do that.
The employer can.
You can go back to 3%.
If I read it right, if the employee opts to go to 3%, the employer can also opt to go to 3%. But the employee can only do that for a year, and then you have to revisit it.
Right.
And there was a hardship piece in there as well. So what's hardship? We don't know.
Yeah.
So how are you going to prove that? And so
Do
on
you,
and
do
so
you
forth.
think employers would, they can't be in a position where they can encourage people to opt out, though, can they?
No.
No.
No, that would be the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
The Treasury did note that you may see some impact in wage increases.
That's right, I was going to ask you about
if
that.
you were going to go for 3%, then the employer might say, well, I've got to give you another 0.5% anyway, so I'll give you 2.5% for your wage. I actually think that's not the best approach, but that's almost inevitably some will do that.
That was noted by Treasury. Rising contribution rates may dampen wage rises. Plus, there's another issue, which the government seems to support. Here's the Finance Minister.
The government recognises that, over time, employer contributions may effectively form part of the wage negotiation process.
It's called total remuneration, which means KiwiSaver is not an add-on, it's part of your salary. And the Retirement Commissioner is not a fan.
I've been very clear that I think the total remuneration approach should be abolished.
Yep.
It wasn't part of the original KiwiSaver settings. That was changed a few years back, and I think it should be changed back. I think that when you're talking about something as important as retirement savings, and most employers are good employers, as we know, there's contributions from government, there's contributions from employees, and there needs to be contributions from employers. Total rem, we think, is a way around the system, which I think is completely against the spirit of KiwiSaver.
Do you have any research to say how many employers are actually doing that?
We think about 50% or so, not
50%,
sure.
so half of employers are doing it.
Yeah, I think so. And again, it's you can see why it's attractive for an employer, but it's completely against the KiwiSaver principles, which is why I think that one of the recommendations I'll be making in the report we're doing to government at the end of the year, this is the big 3-yearly one we do on the retirement system, one of those recommendations will absolutely be around total rem.
And will you
And
be
I don't think I'm going to change my view that it should be abolished.
I'd probably agree with that. It's
Right, I wouldn't have thought you would agree with that because
but fewer and fewer employers are doing that.
it's still about 50% in the KiwiSaver.
Oh, okay. Well, the last number I heard was 25.
Oh, okay.
But as Minister Willis highlighted yesterday, it's actually hard to find any definitive information.
Right.
There's a whole argument, and it's been there right from the start, is the KiwiSaver contribution a plus or an included?
Yep.
And as you pointed out, it's sort of 50-50. It's a plus or it's an included. In some ways, having that contribution as a plus is actually a good tool for keeping valued staff.
Right.
And as any employer will tell you, keeping valued staff is something you want to do because it's really hard to find a replacement or train one up, and it's more expensive.
Another change is saving money for the government. Every June, there are lots of TikTok reminders that
You've got less than 3 weeks to make sure you're getting your $521 of government money.
You can get about $500 a year free from the government.
not anymore. Slashing it from $521 to $260 has freed up $1 billion a year for Finance Minister Nicola Willis to spend elsewhere.
I guess it's possible to be happy and sad all at the same time, right?
Yeah. Kirk Hope is from the Financial Services Council, which represents many retirement savings providers.
Reducing the government's contribution was possibly the right decision. It's a difficult one, though. Again, halving that contribution will have a significant impact. But clearly in a budget where the government didn't have too many other choices, it was always going to make some sort of move like that.
So who is that going to affect the most?
Well, again, it probably affects sort of lower paid workers because, again, their government contribution is halved. It's not so troubling for people on over 180,000. They seem to be able to look after themselves.
Yeah, and they're not getting a contribution full
Exactly.
stop from now on.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's again, I think the hardest hit will be those kind of lower paid workers, right?
And the government contribution, to some stats I've been reading, is that it does in the end make up quite a big percentage point of the overall total savings for KiwiSaver.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Retirement Commissioner Jane Wrightson has identified another set of workers who won't like it.
The key area where we need to look much harder is around the self-employed sole trader, contractor, gig worker. We're doing some work on this, and again we'll make recommendations to the government at the end of the year, because these guys, there is almost no incentive for them to belong to KiwiSaver now, with a $280 a year government contribution.
260 actually, yeah.
260, exactly right. So you have to start thinking about what are the right incentives for retirement savings across all of the workforce, not just those in paid employment.
So that's the nuts and bolts of the main changes. But what about the overall trajectory of the savings scheme? When it was set up, KiwiSaver was meant to be overhauled every 7 years. 18 years later, it's had one major review. Here's Kirk Hope from the Financial Services Council.
I think the longer trajectory with the contribution rates are constructive. They probably could have taken a few more steps and said, in another 2 years we'd look at another 0.5%, so 4.5%. It's sort of look at a bit more of a longer term time frame, because I think what you'll hear is from critics about these changes, and they are significant changes, right? And there will be an important contribution over time, but what you'll hear from the critics is it's too piecemeal, and that we need an overarching strategy relating to the whole of retirement income over time. And I think that's something that successive governments should definitely look at.
Malcolm Jackson agrees. He's the CEO of First Cape, which has $44 billion of funds under management.
There is now an appetite to engage in change. It's been over a decade since there was a real change to KiwiSaver.
Yep.
So I think that needs to be commended.
First Cape is a big KiwiSaver provider, owning the BNZ KiwiSaver funds and the newly acquired Concilium KiwiSaver funds.
I think there was a trick missed in not providing a trajectory. There's been a lot of talk around where does KiwiSaver need to get to. Everybody sort of very easily points across the Tasman as their example of getting sort of 11.5%, 12%.
Is that a fair comparison there?
Look, I think they started a long time before us. They earn more over there, and they don't have a total remuneration construct. So there's some big differences between the two schemes. And they don't have national super. So look, there's a different regime over there. The one thing they did do though was they forecast forward. They said we're going to be at 12% over this period of time, and so that enabled people to plan. I think what would have been helpful this time is we go, okay, we're going to 4%, and then we need to be at 5 or 6% over the next 10 years, and then it enables people to plan, because at the same time we're introducing incentives to invest capital. So businesses, it's a finite pool. Where are those businesses going to be able to deploy their capital if they've got to put it into KiwiSaver? What's coming down the line, they don't know. So forecasting provides certainty, and so that would have been helpful.
Right. Okay, all right. In your sort of looking to the future, then, if we're talking about forecasting, in 10 years, where would you like to see contribution rates?
And 10 years is a pretty good number to be at. It's where the FSC is. It's where the Prime Minister's Advisory Council said that in 10 years to be at 10% would be a good place for us to be. It's just who's wearing the 10% is the $120 billion question.
Yeah. So, but in theory, it would be 5 and 5, right? 5 from employer and 5 from employee.
I do think we need to think about decoupling employee and employer.
What do you mean by that?
At the moment, it's you can opt out, so there is no compulsion. I do think if we are serious about KiwiSaver playing a more important role in superannuation, then you can't afford the luxury of being able to opt out. And so I think that then does come down in some part to the employer having to make those contributions.
So it should be compulsory.
For the employer.
For the employer, right. That's like in Australia. And should it be voluntary here for the employee?
For the employee. I think you have to pathway to a full compulsion. You can't just pull a lever and suddenly expect businesses to absorb that level of contribution requirement. That's unrealistic. So I do think you need to sort of leg into that ultimate outcome. But if over the 10 years you are at 10% with, say, 6% of that being employer compulsory, you know at least there's a 6% savings going into people's accounts.
KiwiSaver is being relied on to help Kiwis live a dignified life in retirement. And that means the sector has grown, but perhaps too much with too many players.
We still have an incredibly fragmented market in terms of over 35 KiwiSaver providers, and we only have just over $120 billion in the system. So I think...
So that $120 billion to me sounds like a lot, but is that not enough to go around 35 providers really?
Not really.
No, to get scale, I guess.
To get scale, the fixed cost base to run a KiwiSaver in a high regulation environment is pretty meaningful. And so, you do need to be $2 billion plus to be making a real go of it. And so when you've got that number of market participants, there is some inefficiency within there. So, within one of our objectives within First Cape is to try and deliver the benefits of scale through to the ultimate KiwiSavers.
So hence your acquisition of Concilium, and it's got a couple of KiwiSaver funds.
It does.
So does this put you in that $2 billion?
We also have the BNZ KiwiSaver as well, which has got just over $6 billion in it.
Right. So you're getting the scale. Are you looking for more scale?
I do think we will look for where scale is also value additive for our client value proposition. If there's parts of the KiwiSaver market we're not capturing with our existing proposition, then yes, we will continue to.
And you wouldn't
scale.
be surprised to see others in the industry as well doing the same kind of thing?
Correct, yes.
So you're going to see some consolidation?
I would hope so.
You would hope so. Why do you hope so? Is that just because it's better for your business, or is it better for the actual industry?
It's better for the underlying savers.
So the KiwiSaver landscape is changing for savers and the sector managing those funds. But will it fulfil its supposed role in augmenting the retirement of Kiwis? Or will Kiwis save so much it could one day ease the $30 billion cost to the taxpayer of NZ Super? Not if the current Retirement Commissioner has her way.
My views on New Zealand super haven't much changed, and particularly if you put a woman's lens on it. You have a higher proportion of women over 65, of course. You have a higher proportion of that group who are living on only super or only super and a bit more for a whole bunch of reasons that get tied up with, in effect, the gender retirement savings gap.
Yep.
And so NZ Super is a bedrock of the system. I get really cross when I hear often quite well-paid men in suits start pontificating about the drain it is on the economy. And I go, it's only about 6.5% of GDP, in effect, net of tax.
Yep.
That's about the middle of the OECD numbers. It's not that bad. The country can afford it, actually. And I think it's a boring discussion because people go, we can't afford it. And I go, who says? Who says? It's a large chunk of the government budget. It's true.
Yep.
It's not the biggest chunk. And it's an incredibly important part of the retirement income system.
And that wraps up this episode of the NBR Podcast. Social media clips used are listed in the description. Thanks to content producers Joseph Hisayasu and Jake Latham. Up next, from tourism mecca to tech hub, the new vision for Queenstown. I'm Simon Shepherd. We'll catch you then.